Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Doctors Changing Medicine podcast. As always, I am super pumped to be here, super excited. And I'm especially excited because I have my dear friend, Dr. Sasha Shillcutt here. And we're going to be talking about her brand new book. At the time of this recording, today is launch day for the book. We'll tell you how to get copies, but this is phenomenal. This is her second book. So I'm excited. I've already ordered my copy, just waiting for it to come in the mail. Now, if you have not heard her before, I don't know why we've done multiple episodes on the podcast with her, but Dr. Shillcutt is a tenured professor and vice chair of strategy in the Department of Anesthesiology at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. She's the founder of Brave Enough, and she does the most amazing conferences. She writes the most amazing books. You should follow her on social media. She is bringing a lot of change, which is what this podcast is all about, to the physician community. So I want you to lean in and I want you to really listen to this because this is not just about two people talking. This is about real change in the physician community. So, Dr. Shillcutt, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's always wonderful to see your beautiful face and to hang out with you for a little bit. Middle of the week makes my day.
Well, see, this is why I always hang out with you. Make me feel so good. Okay. All right. So I want to give you a moment to introduce yourself. I really want people to hear your heart, especially about what you do for the physician community.
Well, I love that you're opening it up like that because I think sometimes people have assumptions of who you are on social media, or maybe because you're a certain specialty, you're this type of personality. We see that a lot. But I am a cardiac anesthesiologist and I'm a mom of four. And I think probably like many of the people listening, I found myself about a decade ago really burned out and thinking, I don't know how to get out of this life that I'm living, but this is not at all what I thought being a doctor was going to be like when I applied to medical school, fresh out of college. And I was totally overwhelmed. I had really no work life control. I was very unhealthy. And I had all these little people at home that were depending on me. And my whole identity was either I was a doctor or a mom. I had no sense of who Sasha Shillcutt was as an individual. And so, I found myself, like so many of us, just totally empty and burned out. And that is kind of what made me start a community which grew to thousands of women doctors and then kind of transformed into my business, Brave Enough, because that was something that I didn't also learn in medical school, that I could own a business, that I could have a mission focused entrepreneurial job outside of medicine. So I started my company, Brave Enough, really just to hold the first conference because the women in my community were asking me to hold a conference. So I thought, okay, I know how to hold conferences because I do that for CME for my real job. I can figure this out for women, but I had no idea what really I all went into owning a business. And then I realized, like, this is more than a business, this is a mission. And I need to figure out what that mission is and what that strategy is. And so through the last 6 years, I've moved from a Facebook community that I really needed to have accountability so I didn't burn out again, to my business, Brave Enough, where I have courses and conferences for women doctors primarily. And now I've written my second book, which is really just for all physicians, not just women. But I would say that why I'm excited to talk to you today is because I think your community is probably already been through what I went through and come out on the other side, or are coming out on the other side, trying to change medicine, trying to own their own companies and really write their own story. And I've learned that this is something that I'm going to probably have to do the rest of my life. Like, it's not like I burned out once in 2013 and then I figured it all out and I have perfect work life boundaries and I never struggle. This book is really about like how boundaries and setting boundaries and really understanding time management. It all comes down to your mission and it all comes back to something you're going to have to do all the time. So I'm excited you're having me on today.
Oh man. Okay, there are so many things to unpack there. Like this could be the whole episode, but we have to talk about your book. And I say that because many of us find ourselves there where we're like, there's an opportunity to do something. And that for you, it was like starting this Facebook group and they wanted a conference. You're like, I can figure that out. But who would have known on the other side of that would be this company, would be these large conferences, would be 2 books. And I'm sure there's more. I won't be surprised if you tell me you're writing a third one right now, right? But who knows? And it's just that thing of embracing and deciding, yes, I'm not sure I can do it. Maybe I'm even afraid, but I'm going to say yes and then figure it out. Like that right there creates so much magic. And you never know what it'll
Mhm,
look like. But, when you
mhm,
find it, it's good. And as physicians, I think, we are mission driven. I mean,
mhm,
why else would you go into medicine, right? It's to help people, it's to bring some kind of change. I can't really be financial. I mean, there are easier ways to make money, I would say, right? And for us to be in a position where we can build businesses around our missions, that's heaven to me.
mhm. Yes.
you know and so listening to your story just makes me all kinds of excited, and thank you for sharing that because it will be inspirational to somebody. Um so I remember your first book, Between Grit and Grace. I don't know, I probably ordered 17 copies for
Oh, thank
all
you.
the young ladies in my life. I'm like, here, go read it. And that was a really great book. And I want you to talk a little bit about your thought process behind the book. And on this side, what the impact of the book has been. And that's as far as because I don't think we'll ever know, right? Our work will never be able to tell the full impact.
It's funny. I just received a message from a woman last week, and she said, I found your book. I stumbled upon your book. I was ready to quit medicine, and somebody handed me this book and said, read this book. And she said, I have been crying and just sitting in my closet reading this book and crying. And I have like highlighted so many sections because I feel like you just described my story. And, I had no idea that that book was very much therapy when I wrote it, when it, and I shared that story of how messed up I was inside and how unhealthy I was. Even though on paper, I think if you would have looked at my CV, I would have looked good, right? And that impact of that book has been that not everybody that reads what you put out in the world, or not everybody that is going to buy your course, or not everybody is going to like get you. But some people are, you're going to see them and they're going to read your post or read your book or come to an event that you're sponsoring, or they're going to take your class, and you are going to be what makes them change and find their mission critical. And she's like, I've made all these changes this week, and I've had all these conversations this week at work about what I will do and what I won't do, and I'm setting boundaries and all these things. And I thought, that is why I wrote the book. I didn't write the book to become a bestseller. I mean, that's great if that happens, but I wrote the book so that I could find those people out there who were struggling like me and say, okay, this is how I got out of this. And I hope maybe 2 or 3 of these tactics will help you.
Oh man, that is so good. That is so, and I'm glad you talked about, your book may not reach everybody. It may not be
Mhm.
for everybody, but it is for somebody. And for that
Yes.
somebody's worth doing the work to write it, to put our work out there, to put our thoughts out there. That is so good. I
Yes.
mean, whoosh. I can just imagine you getting that message. It's so like, this is someone telling you I've changed my life. Like I read your book and I've changed my life. That's crazy.
Mhm. Well, and it's crazy because, in medicine, we are really taught not to have an opinion, right? Like we call ourselves experts and people come to us for expert advice, but we have to act according to the science. And we really shouldn't tell a patient like what we would do. We just say, here's the evidence. This is, the risk benefit of A or B. But when you write a book or when you put yourself out there like this, it's like all you. It's in fact, when I first submitted my first book proposal, the editor said, this is good, but it reads like a prescription. Like nobody, like, who are you? What is your personality? What do you think? And I was like, I'm not used to writing like that, right? Like I'm not even used to telling people my opinion. And so when you have something that you create or innovate, whether it's a business or whether it's a webinar, whether it's a course or a book, people want to know you. They want to hear your opinion. They want to hear your strategies. I mean, yes, you want to obviously back it up with some science and what the literature says, but that's what they want. And it's like scary to do that, as I mean, because you're a phenomenal businesswoman. Like, it's scary to put yourself out there. It's scary to launch something. But that's what people want. They want that authenticity, and they want to know who you are. They all won't love you. They all won't like you, but they may respect you for showing who you are. And I think that is what I've learned in being a business owner for sure.
Oh, this is a whole masterclass, people. I told you. I told you. It can be scary, but it's what your people need, so it's worth
Mhm.
it. And
Mhm.
some people may not like it, and that's okay.
That's
That's
okay.
it's just part of the game. I
Yep.
love it.
Yep.
Okay, so now with all of this, right? All everything that happened with the first book and all the work you put into doing the first book,
Mhm.
what made you decide, well, I'm going to go through all of that all over again, do a second
Good
book?
question. Because you're in the middle of it. So, I learned a ton of things writing my first book. I mean, I learned what I should do, what I shouldn't do. So I wanted to kind of experience this again. But it was funny because my publisher, like right when I published the first book, were like, "Oh, let's write a second book. We want you to write on this, this." And I was like, I'm not feeling that. The pandemic had just hit, and I had a lot of time to be at home and thinking about things. All the activities were canceled at night, and I started thinking about how things that were really good in my life, a Facebook group, a conference, retreats, coaching other physicians, all of these really positive things had the capacity to become draining things and negative things and toxic things. And I I was really like, I thought, gosh, I've already come through burnout. Like, I've already supposed to I figured this out already. Why am I exhausted? Why am I tired? And how could I be tired and exhausted doing all of these things that I actually love doing? And I realized that I needed expertise and help. And I was so exhausted and overwhelmed about 6 months into the pandemic. Probably most of us were, that I was like, something's wrong with me. Okay, this is what we do, right? Like, we struggle in life and we always think something's wrong with us. So I, for the first time in years, went to a therapist, and she said, "Tell me what's going on." So I explained, I have this really good thing here and this really good thing, but I'm so tired. And she said, "You have no boundaries." And I was like, "Boundaries? Aren't boundaries for like people in toxic relationships?" I'm like, "No, you don't get it. I have this really good business. I have these really great kids. I have this great husband. I have this great job." And she's like, "You need boundaries." And what she taught me, and what I think I learned, is that boundaries keep the good in. They keep the good in check. They don't just keep the bad out, they keep the good in, because our biggest passion, our biggest strength, our biggest success has the propensity to become our biggest and most negative, toxic, whatever, fill in the blank in our life, if we don't keep boundaries in check, if we're not brave enough to set boundaries around it. And that's why I wrote the book, because this is like the next phase of my growth, is learning that I can get an invite to do this really amazing thing. But if that really amazing thing that even may fit in my mission competes with my health or my well being, it's not the right thing for me. That's hard. And that's what I'm learning in this season.
I was going to say that is hard.
Very.
It is very hard. I mean, because I think it's easier to identify, well, at least at this stage, it would be a lot easier to identify something that's toxic and you're like, well, I have a boundary for that, like I
Yes.
have a boundary for that. But when you come to this space where you're really aligned with your mission, you're really aligned with your business, you know who you're trying to help, and you have everything mapped out, then a lot of times it's the good that becomes the problem.
Right.
And it's harder to identify, I think, until you've built that muscle over time, it's harder to
Mhm.
identify, and it can sneak on you and you're like, "Why? What's my problem? Everything's perfect." I
Mhm.
totally feel that. Oh my goodness, that is
Yes.
so good. Okay.
Yes.
So now, so for this book, can you give me a scenario, right? So
Yeah.
it could be you, it could be, somebody you've helped or, whichever. But some kind of thing where they needed boundaries. They needed to set brave boundaries, and really around something that could seemed really positive or seemed really good or
Mhm,
really
mhm,
helpful,
mhm.
but it was hurting them
Yeah.
and what they
So,
did.
yeah. So this is probably, I have two boundaries that I have almost everybody that takes my class we go through. And one of them is, I'll just use this example because I think it applies to all of us. Calls at night. Okay. So someone calling you for help, whether they're your work at in a clinical space or in your business or a friend, they're calling you for help at night. And maybe it's Tuesday and you're watching Netflix and you don't care that, your friend is calling you. You're like, oh, he's calling from work. He probably has a question about this project. It's 7 o'clock. I'm not working. I don't really have to answer this, but I'm not doing anything. You answer the call. You fills your ego, right? It's good because you are needed. You are an expert. You're helping someone so you feel like a helper. Fast forward the next week, same person, same time calls you. Now you're annoyed. You're annoyed because you're getting ready to go to a soccer game and it's the championship game and your son is asking for the water bottle and you're rushing around. And now all of a sudden you're ticked off. You're like, why is this guy calling me? I'm not at work. This is rude. They have no boundaries. Well, you have no boundaries because you answered the phone call last week. He doesn't read your mind. He doesn't live your life. So often we need boundaries for ourselves. And so if we had a boundary where I don't answer work calls at night, I just don't even answer my phone at night. I have a automated response and I do in my little app on my phone. I copy and paste. Hey, doesn't look like this is an emergency. I'll get back to you tomorrow. If we had boundaries like that, we wouldn't have expectations of other people to just read our minds and know our stress level. And we also wouldn't have this feeling of like, oh my gosh, like now I'm angry at that person. I may be projecting stress on that person the next day. So this is a simple thing. It's good to be a helper. It's good to be seen as an expert. It's good to be someone that helps others. It's not good to be someone who expects other people to know when you're on, when you're off, when they can bother you, when they can't. Set a boundary. It's so simple and it's life changing. And so that's an example of how it keeps your relationships at work, about work. It's very clear. Brene says clear is kind. And I love that because it's true. It's transparent. People know now I don't answer my phone at night. And if I'm not on call, I don't answer my work phone. So that's a clear boundary for everyone. And it also says to other people, I respect boundaries. You can share your boundaries with me.
Ooh, I love that. And you and I are twins. I almost never answer my phone. I'm like, text me, I'm a teenager. I'll get to it sometime.
I
It's
know.
so
I
bad, and I'm
know.
admitting it here, but
No, it's
I'm like,
good.
"No," my phone is always on silence, like,
Yes.
I'll get to it when I do. So I love that
Yes.
example,
Yes.
and you're right, like, I truly believe, and, maybe you'll tell me, I truly believe that, there is a systemic problem that creates burnout and all of that. But there are also habits that we have as physicians that create burnout as well. This being one of them, right? Because the number of calls you could get at night, the number of requests, like, oh, do this. And it's like 7 o'clock at night. But for us, it's like, yeah, I want to help and it will only take me X number of minutes. But then it piles up and then it's no
Mhm.
longer, 5 minutes
Mhm.
or 10 minutes. It's
Mhm.
now 2 hours, and then everybody's like, yeah, she's always willing to help. Even, I even text her, I even call her at 7 o'clock and she she does all the things for me. And you're like, oh my goodness, that's not the impression I was trying to create here.
Right.
And so I
Right.
think that, when I think about boundaries, I also look at it as a cure, not, like one of the cures for burnout, like really.
Mhm.
That's,
Mhm.
and not
Yes.
just work, but life, period.
Yes. Yeah. And I think we have this systemic expectation in medicine that being a good doctor is being always available. I don't know where we have done this. And then on top of that, being a parent is being always available. Well, that those two things are impossible. They are, you cannot actually have those two things. So what are you going to do? And so we have to change the systemic expectation that being a professional means always available. Being a great mom means always available. That is not compatible with life. And if you are someone who is an always person, you will burn out. You may not burn out this year, but you will. You will either burn out or develop a negative behavior or an unhealthy behavior to cope. And I see this all the time. Like, I see people with zero boundaries, highly professional, high achieving people, and I'm like, why have we created this expectation that that's what a professional does, or that's what a physician does, or that's what a parent does? We have to just break down those expectations. And I'm hoping that this book allows people to see there's freedom in setting boundaries.
Oh, I love that. Now, what would you say to the person who hears you and is like, "You're right, and I've already started the negative way of coping, and I am somewhat burned out, but I feel guilty because I find that a lot, right? Like, I
Mhm.
feel guilty that I can actually do this, but I'm saying that I'm not going to do this,
Yeah.
right? As far as always being available."
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's extremely common for most of us to feel guilt because we're going against the grain of what society says is good. And most of us are very ethical people. We don't want to be bad. We don't want to let anyone down. However, if we think about it, that it's feeding your ego and you're going to do the action out of guilt. Who wants that? Like, if I invite you to my birthday party, I don't want you to come because you'll feel bad if you don't come. I want you to come because you want to be there, right? So when we start to say no and we start to set boundaries and we start to be transparent, first of all, we become extremely transparent, kind, brave people to others. And they go, now, when Sasha says yes, I know she's going to show up 100%. She's not just doing it because she's told me no multiple times. And interestingly, in 2013, when I burned out, I had in my office a whiteboard and I wrote everything down that I said no to for the year. And I did it just to get courage. But looking back, I see that all the people I said no to, they were still my friends. They still respected me. They still asked me again to do things. Like, we have this whole mindset like, oh, I'm going to say no to this person and they're going to blackball me, or they're never going to ask me again to be on their podcast or speak, or they're never going to talk to me again. It's not true. Most people, when you say no to them, they think about it for 10 seconds and they're on to their next thing. They're like, oh, okay. And they're just on. We build it up because we all have egos. We build it up to be this big thing. It's not. They're just like, thank you for telling me yes or no, and they're on to their next action. So if you have the guilt, don't be hard on yourself. All of us do. Recognize that's just how society has made us feel. But push through the guilt and set the boundary anyway, because you will be respected because you will be honest and transparent.
Okay, people, we have a 9-year study, okay? So from 2013 to 2022, she's like, "They're all my friends," and I said no.
They
So
are.
so that's good. We have a 9-year study to look at. So people are like, "Dr. Una, enough. Where can we find this book? We wanna go read it. How can we find more out about, building these brave boundaries?" Where do they go to find it?
So you can go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever books are sold and find Brave Boundaries. You can probably find it in your local bookstore too if you're a local person and you want to support small businesses.
Oh, I love it. Okay. So, guys, ladies, go get the book. Okay. And the thing about books I found is, two things. One is, I don't read titles, I read authors.
Mm.
And, Dr. Sasha is not talking about something that she has not lived or something she's not doing or something she's not training other people on. So those kind of books typically are a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge, real nuggets, because it's not a copy and paste, or you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
not that. It comes out of expertise that's been built over time. And the second thing is, it takes one good paragraph and one chapter to change your life. And
Mm.
so I want you to go get the book. I want you to stay curious. I want you to read it, and I want you to make it count. And then you would be the person sending her a message and saying, "Hey, your book changed my life." Okay. So the way I end this show is I ask a question. This podcast is all about creating a movement of change in the physician community, right? There's a million of us. If we don't like the way things are, we can actually change it. So that's what the podcast is about. That's why I feature people who are doing their piece to create change in medicine. So I tell everybody you can't just listen to this. You have to share it with the other doctors in your life because this is a movement. This is how we're the cavalry spread the message. So, what would you say is the reason why people should share this particular episode with you on it? Why should they share it with the doctors in their lives?
I would say that probably the best thing to do is to we in order to have change, we have to all set boundaries and say no and push against the system, unpaid work, you know, the things that physicians every day are asked to do that other people would never be asked to do for free. If we don't all set those boundaries and join that movement, we won't change medicine. The more you say, bring the people who don't understand into the problem and say, I would love to do that, but where's the money and time associated with it? Let come in and see this life, come and see what I'm dealing with here. The more we bring people in by setting boundaries and saying no, the more we can lead to change.
There you go. All right. So be part of the change. Share the episode. Go get your copy of the book. Dr. Sasha, thank you as always for coming on. This was a fun episode. And for everyone else, can't wait to see you on the next episode of the Doctors Changing Medicine podcast.